And finally, what got to him, I said, yeah, I was in the back there and behind your school, and I saw this exercise room with all these girls in there, and they were doing this twirling things with the ribbons, so I thought I'd take some pictures of them. And as soon as I said that, he latches onto my arm, and he goes, you're coming with me. And I was like, okay.
How long?
We should have done that 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, like how long did that take?
Oh,
That's
my God,
crazy.
it took forever.
Welcome to the 10th episode of the Universal Podcast, where every episode combines psychology with another topic. In this episode, we're going to be looking at psychology and threat detection. And I have with me Daniel Dluzneski, retired Lieutenant U.S. Secret Service member, threat specialist, and author of The First 5 Minutes, School Shooting Survival Guide for Administrators and Teachers. Daniel, welcome.
Samuel, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Let's start off by just knowing a little bit about your background. So the Secret Service, I didn't know this, the Secret Service was started as a measures to fight counterfeiting money. And that was in Abraham Lincoln's time. And it wasn't really a presidential protection service until there was actually an assassination in 1901.
Yes, McKinley. Actually, and Teddy Roosevelt was the vice president who took over. But yes, it was started back in 1865 by Lincoln, because after the Civil War, there was all this money that was being printed on both ends. And he decided, okay, we only need one, denomination. So I need some kind of group, a government agency that went out and stopped counterfeiting. That was the reason it was started for. And again, it wasn't until McKinley's assassination that Congress decided that the service should protect the president. Then as years went on, protecting the vice president, the president's family, vice president's family, and it's gained so much now that actually the service is protecting diplomats that come to this country, any big events that happened. When we had the Pope come to that was the Secret Service's job to take care of that. So any of these big events with high-profile protectees, the service is the one who takes over that. And from my end, I work under the uniform division. It's just a separate division of the service. Not the guy with the suit on that talks with a microphone into his hand or whatever. I'm actually in uniform. And the nice thing about being in the uniform division was the specialized units. K-9, the counter snipers, the SWAT team. They were the guy. That's why I wanted to stay with that division, because I can get into specialized positions. So, yeah, that's how it started, the history of it behind it. And, now when people see the secrets or talk about the Secret Service, the media and most of the people think, oh, those are the guys that protect the president. Not the majority of what the service does is counterfeiting, credit card fraud. That's where most of the personnel is. It's a very small division that deals with protection.
First of all, thank you for giving all that context, because this is completely new information, and I believe most people didn't know that. I think they had the common association that Secret Service equals the individuals around the president and the vice president, and I guess any sort of other security detail for their family and other dignitaries. So let me ask you, with that broader range of understanding of what this career path essentially entails, what drew you into this field?
I think it's just something that, I don't want to say when I was a kid you wanted to be a police officer or a fireman, when you're playing as a kid. It's just something I don't know. I knocked around at different jobs. I didn't start out when I was really young. It was just something when I grew up on a farm. So that work ethic was already ingrained in me. And once I got through college, I just knocked around at different jobs, just trying to find something that fit. I worked in a warehouse. I worked for DHL, which is like a FedEx courier service. I worked in security. I did all different odd jobs. I drove a school bus. Just something I would find. And then I finally just decided to sit down and figure, I had to have a career. Odd jobs are one thing. I could always find work. but I needed a career. And this is way before the internet, way before, all this stuff with computers and everything. And I either read something or something that talked about this job in Washington, D.C. to work for the Secret Service. Now, I knew about the protection part of it. I didn't know this other part about it, the uniform division part, which they started out as part of the Metropolitan Police and Park Police, guarding the White House alone, just the White House grounds. They were the ones that were, in charge of keeping it safe, but, monitoring guests and stuff. And it just grew from there, and it finally integrated with the Secret Service. So I looked at that, and then I saw the specialized units. I thought, geez, that might be interesting. So I took a shot. And this was way back, 1980. And I applied, and I get this big pamphlet coming back, and there's red ink on there, like a teacher would write in red ink. Your height must be in proportion to your weight. And I'm like, what? So
what does that even mean? Your height must be
what that meant was I was too skinny. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, I sent it back. I was like, here's my weight and here's my height. Because they wouldn't explain it specifically. So I sent it back. They sent it right back and say, no, your height must be in proportion to your weight. So somehow I got a phone number. I was able to get a hold of someone. And they said, no, you have to weigh, I think I needed to gain like 12 pounds or something like that. I said, hire me. I'll gain the weight. I'll eat bananas, whatever heck it takes. Oh, no. You have to, we can't do anything until you match that up. So
if you're like 6'8", do you have to be like 500 pounds?
No, it was just whatever scale they used, Samuel. I don't know. Maybe it's a military scale they use that if you're this height, you must be this weight or something. They didn't. I guess if I was overweight, it would have been the same way. However, that worked out.
I would have assumed if there was like body requirements, it would just be that you can shield people, but then I wouldn't word it as proportionality and rather like actual measurements. Like you must be at least this wide, whether it's fat or muscle or whatever, or just
I don't know what it was, but I tell you, when I got on, they were still having weigh-ins. And guys would put in their hands the rolled up, quarters and half dollars to make the weight. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So anyways, when this first came back to me, I was, instead of going to my doctor, hey doc, white out that and add 12 pounds and just sign off on it, will you? No, I stupidly, I said, no, let me gain the weight. I'll gain the weight. Well, my metabolism was so much, it took me over a month to gain that weight. And once I finally did, I said, okay, I'm in. Here I go. And I called them back and they said, oh, you just missed the class. Well, when was the next class? Well, not for another year. I'm like, I'm not going to wait around for a year. So I knocked around, Samuel, for another 8 years doing other stuff. I worked in import-export. I worked for a security agency. I worked just knocking around. Now I'm in my 30s. And now I'm like, okay, still, I got to find some kind of career. And I looked it up. And the service at the time, the maximum age was 34. And I was 32. I said, okay, let me try again. And this time I made it in. But now I'm in a class of kids that are 21 years old. So I'm the old man in this class. Anyway, it all worked out. It worked out better, I think, going in older. Because once I got on the job, I had done other jobs. This to me was great. To these kids who had never had a job before, they were shocked. What do you mean I have to have my day off canceled? What do you mean I got to work 12-hour shift? To me, it's like, no, it's more money. That's great. And the nice thing was my supervisors were my age. So I got along with them very well. And I was able to get not promoted quickly, but I was able to get certain positions because of my age and because I had a college degree. Back in the 80s, not a lot of police departments had people with college degrees. Now it's pretty much expected, about 75%, maybe 80%.
The 34-year-old cutoff, that's the 34-year-old, that cutoff is specifically for entrance, right?
Yes. Yeah, for entrance, and because at the time they had a 20-year retirement requirement. So that would have put you at 54. I think now they dump it up. You can be 57, I think. And then you have to get out of law enforcement. You can't carry a weapon anymore. So it's changed a little bit. But yeah, that was the reason for that.
So right now, you focus more on security in educational facilities,
Yeah,
correct?
when I left the service back in 2013, I moved down here to Florida, and I was just going to retire, Samuel. That was it. Sit on a beach. I'm good. My now ex-wife at the time was saying, "No, you're driving me crazy. You got to get out and do something," because being that alpha personality, and most police officers have an alpha personality and the routine, it was driving me crazy. And it just so happened that our county school here had a position. I applied for it and got in, and we had 100,000 students in 140 schools, which I didn't realize. I'm in Florida. I'm thinking this is where people retire. They don't teach kids down here, but no, there's a lot of children down here, a lot of schools. And I was just here given the reins and, go do what you got to do, not given any kind of direction except, this is what is required by the legislature. This is what required by the school board. So it was nice that I was left on my own. However, I didn't have autonomy. I didn't have the power to go to a school and say, you're missing a lock here. I need this on here, or these doors aren't required, or I need your communication system. But I didn't have that. I didn't have that power.
It seems like you would be more, at least again, without that power, they would be asking you almost to be like a theoretical consultant.
Correct. I had to go back and explain to an assistant superintendent, who then had to pass it on to a superintendent, who then had to pass it on to a school board to say, here's what we believe is required. So yes, it was more of, yeah, exactly what you said, more theoretical, that I had to go out and see the issues and bring them back. I couldn't fix them right away, which was frustrating to me. But eventually, again, the bureaucracy going through a school system, I figured it out and was able to get things done. Not as quickly as I wanted, but eventually they did get done because the ideas were they were correct.
Your ability to sort of handle that bureaucracy, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that anything even remotely connected to the executive branch is bureaucratic. Did anything in your experiences in the Secret Service help shape the way you specifically move through that system and in your your modeling for how to properly secure schools?
Yeah, two dynamics. One was my training. And my training was, and I've explained this on other podcasts, that we're the only division. I had to qualify with my weapon every month. Every month I had to go and qualify with my weapon. I don't think most agencies are every 6 months, every year, most police agencies. Every month I had to go. So it became this muscle memory, which was what they wanted, and this implicit muscle memory to, point, shoot, what, you're going to qualify at and hit the target. So I transferred that over to the school system when I had run emergency drills with the teachers. I said, look, I want you to have the confidence when something happens, this kicks in. And you would drill enough times to where it became rote, like, buttoning a shirt or whatever. I say without thinking, but yeah, just kicking in that way. On the other side of getting things done through the bureaucracy, again, once I learned from other people that I was in an office, which was great. I was in an office with the architects. I was in an office with a fire inspector, with the men and women that handled the maintenance. And I would just ask them, okay, this is what I need to do. How do I do it? And they would just explain the procedure to me. And again, slow process, but things eventually got done.
I want to ask almost a psychologically silly question. Do you think that perhaps the fact that you are the oldest person in the Secret Service and you are worth much, at the time, people who are, you said, like a decade younger than you, do you think that perhaps was a factor in you now essentially trying to ensure that children are safe today?
That's a good question. It's something I never really thought about. It's possible. It's also, I think the other side is that didn't adopt my son until I was 50 years old. So again, before I had children, I probably wouldn't have thought as much about it. But once you have children, then it's a different dynamic. And my son, obviously, well, we got him when he was 6 months old, went through the school system. And that was another thing that I guess kind of pushed me, because anytime I would try to explain something, going, look, I have, I have a process system. My son is in school. So it's not just something that I'm telling you what to do when I don't know. I do have a child in school, so I do know what it's like to go through these procedures and these drills and all this kind of stuff. So it just gave me, I guess, more backing in order to do this. But I think the thing of it is, not that I was always attracted to that position, because I did think about teaching. Because once I got a history degree, my first degree was in criminal justice, then I got a history degree, and everyone around me said, you should go teach, you go teach. I said, I don't know if it's something I want to do, but whenever I did go to a school, I love talking to these kids, especially elementary school kids. I mean, they're innocent, they're, fairly naive, they're going to listen to you, all this kind of stuff. Once you got the middle and high school, no, that went out the window. But, they're not going to listen to anything.
As a high school teacher, I'll say it is a very difficult task to ensure that you have sustained attention, especially with the TikTokification of their brains. You have to be able to be animated and excited, and you have to be able to jest them back, so they know that you're essentially a human. You're not just like this automaton regurgitating certain components of academia.
Yeah, and Samuel, the attention span now, because of the social media, 30 seconds, you got to get them. Anything longer than that, they just blank out, and it's horrible. But that's a different area. We talk about cell phones and social media. That's a different subject at a different time.
Before I jump into my next question, I just want to say, as someone who is adopted as well, I think that's fantastic that you've adopted someone.
Thank you.
And raised them.
Thank you. He is thriving. He actually is in Indiana now. He's going to go to Indiana University. He's there with his mom for orientation, and I will be the one taking him in August to the university. So yeah, he's thriving. He did very well. He went through the International Baccalaureate program, did very well. So we're very proud of him.
I love that. Well, again, congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
My next question's a bit dark, and the thunder that's in the background, I think, is pretty fitting, I guess.
We're in Florida.
Yeah. Well, if it's anything like the Florida that I've been to, the thunderstorms are crazy and then they're done.
And right, exactly. Yeah, they don't last long.
My question is essentially, what are the components of an effective threat detection system, and how would you juxtapose it between, let's say, in schools versus in non-schools? Because, and this is me just kind of zooming out, you have the Sandy Hook elementary shooting. The elementary school in 2012 had about 370 students.
Yes.
You have the infamous Columbine High School in 1999, which some people say was the first mass shooting, which had 1,600 students. And then you have Virginia Tech, which happened more recently in 2007, and that college has about 30,000 people and is across 2,600 acres.
Yes.
You also have the Boston Marathon bombing, which was in a completely open area. You have the Las Vegas shooting, which was kind of essentially in a crowd and killed 56 and injured over 500 people. So there's so many different types of environments in which threat obviously occurs. And again, of course, with Donald Trump's rally on July 13th, again, thousands of people in an open area. So my question for you is, how exactly do you sort of create an effective threat detection system or model or routine? And how do you juxtapose it between schools, non-schools, and I guess different environments?
First, I'll say with the non-schools before we get to schools. When I was with the Secret Service, we would have daily intelligence briefings. So first off, you want to know where is a possible threat coming from? Is it coming from someone who's, I want to say, a nutcase who's sending emails? Is it someone who's actually physically shown up? Are you getting things over the internet that's coming in with some kind of threats? Are they viable threats? I'll give you one example, and this is just something that's off the top of my head, because in one way, not only dealing with this with just a corporation or the White House, but with schools, you'd get a call for a bomb threat. So sometimes a bomb threat would come in, hey, there's a bomb in your building, click, and hang up. For something like that, whether it's, I don't care where it is, whether it's in a government building or whether it's in a school, whatever it is, something like that, I'm like, okay, it's just a threat. Tell your people, look around your office, look around your wherever, everyone look around. Do you see a device? Anything that looks suspicious, a backpack that's not supposed to be there, whatever. And just do what they call a cursory sweep. It doesn't be that detailed. I don't need to have the police come in with a dog and search. No, there's no device. Next call comes in and says, there is a bomb. It's on the second floor, in room so-and-so, under Mr. Smith's desk. Now you're very specific. Now you went to another level. Now you're like, okay, this is a very specific call. And you would obviously, sometimes you would keep going. Most places that are of high security or high threat level will have a checklist and to go through and ask the bomber, what time is it supposed to go off? How big is it? How much does it weigh? And is it on a timer? I mean, anything. They'll just go through the list. And sometimes they'll give you the information. Sometimes they won't. They'll just hang up. But if you're being specific, okay, now you're not at the next level. You need to evacuate. Now you're going to bring in the bomb team, and we're going to go wherever the specific was. So it's just, in order to do that, you've got to get the information first. Now, if you've got something where it's, just for example, an active shooter situation, that's something where you try to prepare as best as possible. We can't make buildings prisons or schools prisons. I mean, that's the same dynamic. We can't make them prisons. We don't want to. We want to have still a welcoming environment, but protective enough that if something bad happens, we need to slow them down. It's basically, Samuel, what's called a layered approach, a multi-layered approach. And I don't care if it's a school or if it's a government building, it's a courthouse, whatever it is. You have a multi-layered approach. You just slow them down. You're not going to be able to stop them completely, but you slow them down enough so the good guys can get there and neutralize the threat. So it's just something that it all depends on the information you're getting. Now, again, sometimes you may have information that says it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I've got, oh my gosh, it's on the internet. I see it. Here's the time frame, everything that's going to happen. And then it doesn't happen. So you get all wound up and you're at DEFCON 1 and oh my God, this is it. And then nothing happens. I mean, look at 9/11. 9/11, I was working at the White House. And when that first plane hit, everybody was like, okay, the pilot must have passed out. Something happened. So everyone didn't immediately go to the red flag or whatever. Then when the second plane hit, then the wheels started turning like, this is something weird. This is not right. But everyone, again, didn't immediately shut down because, again, we're still processing this, going, now we got two planes, hit the towers. And then eventually, it didn't take hours. I think it was more, minutes that they finally said, okay, we need to shut things down, evacuate the White House, close the perimeter. And then as that was happening, then more information came in. Then we found out about the plane out in Pennsylvania, and it just gathered steam from that point. And I tell you what, Samuel, when I went through that, and I think everyone that went through that, panic doesn't set in, your training kicks in. But still inside, you really didn't know what was going on. You had no idea. And the radio traffic, you're hearing things over the radio, you're like, just the odd rumors. Fire engines were stolen. There's 6 ambulances that were stolen from such and such hospital on its way into the district. We've got 10 silver vans that we're seeing on I-66 heading to Washington, D.C. We're like, oh my God, what is going on? And we really didn't feel, for myself, I didn't feel settled or at least less afraid than when we took over the skies. Because once we had, back then I guess it was F-14s, maybe F-16s, once we saw the jets flying overhead, we're like, okay, we know we're not getting bombed from the air. Now whatever's going to happen is going to come down the streets. But I really, at the time, thought, I have no idea. There could be tanks coming down these streets. We had no idea. And that's something that again, when you talk about threat assessment or just threat detection, we had the best communication systems. We had the air, obviously, but it was just something that the city everywhere. I mean, but DC was just shut. It was just gridlocked. There was no phone communication. You couldn't go anywhere. I mean, the streets were completely blocked, and it took hours. I don't think I was able to get a hold of my wife by a landline till almost 10 hours later. By the time we got through, the cell phones were down. So it's something when you think about it that was very major. But even minor things. Look at the CrowdStrike thing just the other day. I mean, this had nothing to do with what we're talking about. But that shut all this stuff down.
Well, it was also, I mean, it does a little bit because it is an essence of security where now there's so many different systems that are suddenly and at the time inexplicably haywire. So
Yes.
that is something that causes people to behave sometimes irrationally, which kind of leads to another question that I have, which is essentially how in from your experiences, how do you believe people sort of behave naturally in these sort of situations without your consulting or the consulting of any other sort of threat specialty? Sorry, with any other threat specialists.
No,
how do you think people sort of naturally respond to threat? And then I'd like to ask you to tell me a little bit more about what you do to counteract the sort of the natural, and I guess the word is innocent, flaws and foibles that we have in our responses to when things go haywire, whether it's a system update that causes a massive cascade of negative effects, or a terrorist attack, or a school shooting.
I think this is more in your lane. There's a good book out there by Amanda Ripley, and it's called The Unthinkable. And she talks about disasters throughout the United States of what happens, all the way back to the Oklahoma City bombing, going back. And she does talk about 9/11. She does talk about hostage situations and how people react. And most of the time, and again, I think this is more for your lane. Most of the time, the first thing is denial. Denial is the first thing. Oh, it's firecrackers. Oh, it's nothing. Everything's okay. And then after denial, it's a delay. You're supposed to evacuate. You're supposed to get out. And people will delay from doing that because they're looking for direction. And usually it takes someone, whether it's training or their what they work as. Let's say, as you know, a doctor or a nurse, they're going to go to the person that's injured. They're going. That's in their DNA. Same thing with law enforcement or firemen. They're going to go. So people kind of fall into that pattern of what their job is or what works for them, and it just along those lines. It's what happened in 9/11 is exactly what happened. What you had talked about. That finally people, when they did get direction, then you started leading them out. And you're still in kind of shock denial, but it's just something you just have to do. Look, no one knows, and I talked about this before, no one knows how you're going to react in an emergency. You have no idea how you will react. Most of the time it's going to be fight or flight, the stomach churning, your palms are going to get all wet and whatever. Like when if you're going to go parachuting or whatever it is, something you haven't done before. But when it happens, you just don't know how you're going to react. Some people will act very heroic, and like you probably know, there are stories of car accidents where people have superhuman strength and will lift the car off somebody. I mean, it's just something that kicks in, and this person could be perfectly natural, just the calmest person, and something snaps. And they just go in and help. So I think it's just something. It could be nature. It could be how you're brought up. I don't know. But sometimes it works, and a lot of these people become heroes. They don't even want to be.
I mean, fight or flight is one of the most fascinating circumstances that we can experience. I mean, now they call it fight, flight, or freeze. But when you're actually having the adrenaline and the cortisol pumping, it really is one of the most fascinating things that you end up being physically stronger, faster. Your endurance is much higher because you're hyper oxygenated. If you get slashed somewhere that you can bleed out, your circulatory system has upped your ability to coagulate, so you don't bleed out as quickly. Pupils dilate so you could see better in the dark, you can see movement better, but all of that comes at a gargantuan cost. And executive functioning, like your deep hypothetical thinking and really rational like social planning, all of that is basically at zero. You, just like you said, some people fell into habituation, or rather their habits, their sort of what they've been routined to do. And this reminded me of two things. One, Gavin DeBecker, who the threat specialist, who created the Mosaic system, he was telling a story about how this woman had this gut feeling that someone was just off, and she didn't trust that gut feeling, and that's a big part of this. And then she was coming back from a movie. She was at a movie and she was leaving, and she saw the person, and he was chasing her, and she was thinking in her head, I have to attack this person. And before she knew it, as she was thinking about this, she had already attacked him. She had already used her keys to basically gash him, and she secured her daughter, and they drove off. And it's literally some of the recording mechanisms, or more specifically, the encoding systems are off. And I can juxtapose this with one of my favorite books on psychology ever. It's so beautifully written, is Dr. Stephen Gross's The Examined Life, which is a play on Aristotle's quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living," which is a beautiful quote, but that's a separate thing. And he speaks about 36 cases, a London-based psychotherapist, and he spoke about on 9/11, there were some people who, having seen the first plane hit the tower, being in the other tower, looked to each other and saw some people go into a meeting and decided to follow them. And one of the survivors was talking about this, that they were able to really rattle themselves back into sort of a groundedness and say, what the hell is going on? I should evacuate. And right. It really is fascinating. So this all leads to a question. Does this capacity, or rather tendency, to reset to what has been routine for us, does that inform some of your consulting? This idea that we reset into a routine?
Yes, and again, some of that, again, I lead back to denial, because even when I started with the school systems, I would go and try to have a drill, and a lot of times it was the same thing. It's not going to happen here. It'll never happen here. We don't need to do that. We're fine. Everything's fine. And I've even gone back and I said, well, you know what? Let me ask some of these private schools if they just need me to do a security assessment. Same answer. No, we're fine. No, we're good. And it's just, look, it doesn't, I was willing to do it for free. I said, look, I'll do it for free. You know, I can give you an assessment. No, we're good. So it's that something, like you said, in routine, where they would think that, okay, you know, it happened in Sandy Hook, it happened over here, it happened over there. It'll never happen here, we're fine. So it's just, I think it's just something that maybe because, again, they're in denial, but it's not something where if you did want to do something, it doesn't cost much. I don't know if that's what their first thought is. Oh my gosh, this is going to cost our school so much money, we don't have it in the budget. No, it really doesn't cost much at all to keep your school safe. So I try to explain that when I finally did get into the system, how this was going to work out. But I tell you, it's the dynamics in a school. I mean, and you've dealt with that. Schools are just different from corporations. You know, when you've got principals that have to listen to superintendents, who have to listen to a school board, who the other side has to listen to a teachers union, and then you get law enforcement mixed in that. It's like oil and water, and now we're just like, we're butting heads because law enforcement or safety person saying this, teachers union and the school board is saying that.
If you were offering your services for some of the schools for free, or even at a reduced price, and they were still saying no, what do you think fueled that denial? Do they just think, oh, it could never happen to me, or do you think there's other things that were involved? Why would they choose us?
Yeah, no, I think it's just that they think it would never happen to them. They don't need that. It was a kind of thing like, no, we're good. We don't need that. It was almost like an arrogance that, they felt that they were doing enough and they didn't want any outside help to come in to do anything different, to tell them that something was wrong. I think it's just because of where I'm at, which is, it's not a rich county by any means, but it's fairly, higher middle income. And a lot of these private schools, obviously, have a lot of rich clientele. And I don't think they wanted to see someone come in and tell them things were wrong. Because if that ever got back to their clientele, they say, oh my God, no, you did what? No, we're pulling our kids out. We're going to go somewhere else. So it comes down to the money. It comes down to the dollars.
They also don't want thunder in paradise, and pun intended, considering
right. No, exactly.
that. So you know what that reminds me of? That sort of arrogance. I mean, obviously they're going to associate help for whatever X is means that X is lacking, and that could yield in their mind. They can't really hold these two conflicting ideas at once. They have this idea that because there's a threat specialist coming in, oh my God, we're unsafe now. It's
something's wrong. Yes,
which is quite the opposite. You're you're going to be safer. And
yes.
This arrogance reminds me of it's not the, I don't think it's the primary reason, but Stanley Milgram in 1961 did the electric shock experiment, where essentially there was this, they would have these people, there's many different versions of it, but basically it was a quote unquote learning experiment where you would meet someone who you would be teaching this sort of like memory game. Okay. And every time they got something wrong, you would electrocute them. And you wouldn't see the person, but it would get worse and worse. So the voltage would get higher, and eventually, and the way they made this consistent is there was no one actually there. It was a recording. But eventually there was people saying like, I have a heart condition, please stop. And they kept doing it just because sometimes they had an authority. But one of the reasons why this experiment was conducted was because of the astronomical arrogance of Americans and Westerners believing that they could never do what the Nazis had done in Nazi Germany. They couldn't reconcile the fact that many Nazis, all Nazis, were humans just like them, who little by little became essentially corrupted. And it just was, this is what it's giving me like a connection to that, in that there's this arrogance that blinds people from the almost inevitable reality that we can be thrown into different situations and not even recognize the person in the mirror within that circumstance.
Yes, I believe that. No, absolutely. That's spot on.
Because people go into these routines, or they kind of, the executive function goes all the way down to essentially what has been a habit for you. Is that why these drills are important? Because you kind of, the motions are more and more familiar. You don't need to calculate everything. You can kind of collapse into that habit.
Exactly. I wanted to keep it as simple as possible, Samuel. I didn't want them to be thinking 10 different things of what's going on, because again, no one knows how they're going to react in an emergency. You're going to forget what day it is. You're going to forget your name. You're going to forget all kinds of stuff. Or, as you said, they could absolutely freeze. So I wanted them, I was sorry, because I am coming from the law enforcement aspect. I wanted them to flip a switch. I wanted them to go into a different mode. Now something bad is happening. Now your job is to protect yourself and protect your children. That's all you got to do. And there was only maybe 5 steps that you had to go through. I asked that all schools now, and this has just happened just within the past couple of years, that during class time, those doors are locked. Keep those classroom doors locked. You're already one step ahead. All you got to do, you turn the lights off, close the blinds, the children sit on the floor, you silence your phone, you do not listen to any announcements, you don't open that door. The good guys are coming. That's it. That's all you got to do. Now, you're going to hear some bad stuff. It's going to happen. You're going to be scared out of your mind. But no one's going to breach through that door. And the argument is because, Samuel, there's plenty of marketing companies out there that push other type of training and other type of drills. My drill is passive. Basically, you're just passively doing what you need to do. There are drills out there that are more reactive. And some education systems like that because they want to do something. They want to be reactive. They want to be involved. But to me, it's unsound, and most of these trainings are dangerous. Look, Sandy Hook was one of the first. That principal tried to confront that shooter and got shot dead. Parkland, you had a gym teacher on the second floor confront the shooter, dead. Nashville, principal comes out, this was a pattern. And this was taught by this marketing company called Alice, that you should counter these individuals and be reactive. No. What are you doing? It's too late at this point. That shooter, their mind is gone. They're at another area. They're not talking. You're not going to talk them down. It's too late. You should have talked to them 6 months ago before any of this was going to happen. At that point, so some of this training, and there's been a lot of civil suits because of this type of training. So I advocate, look, lockdowns work. No shooter has breached a locked door. And it's just stay in a lockdown.
You want to slow them down. So essentially the good guys come in.
Layered security, yes.
In the circumstance, which, God forbid, of course, that someone happens to eventually break through. They break through the glass and somehow shimmy through, even with the shutter and everything. They still shimmy into the classroom. That's going to, one, they have to know if there's anyone in there, if they are searching for a particular person. Two, that is time that is expended, which hopefully is closer and closer to when whatever authorities are there to handle that obvious threat. So that's kind of the approach you're taking instead of teaching teachers kung fu and
children. They have to have teaching children to throw things at a gunman. Like what? You're out of your mind.
I just want to ask if you're serious.
No, I'm serious. Yes, this Alice Martin, you can easily look up on their internet, on their website. They teach children to throw things at a gunman. What, books, pens, pencils? It actually says that. Now, they don't do it for elementary school kids. Middle and high school kids, we're going to teach them to throw things at what? It boggles the mind. Anyway, just back to your point, there is a difference between an active shooter coming into a school, or it doesn't matter, in a building, a corporate office, and goes around and just looks for easy victims. The other side of it is a targeted victim. If you've got someone who's targeting someone, that's a whole different scenario. If they're going specifically, let's say they're really mad at Samuel, and they're going to get Samuel. Well, they're still an active shooter, but it's more of a targeting thing that they're going specifically for you. And that's what happens a lot in hospitals because they're mad because the doctor killed their mom or they gave them the wrong thing.
Or some sort of malpractice or...
Exactly. They're specifically going for that person. Whole different thing than having an active shooter come in and just looking for easy victims.
Well, at least you know in that situation, you know where the destination is.
Correct. Yes.
It's easier to fortify a single room, whether it's the CEO, a principal, a teacher, or the head surgeon, or whatever it is. It's easier to fortify that one area as opposed to a 1,600 acre university or campus.
Yep, that's where you start. You would barricade the door. I even tell these teachers at the minimum, it's probably whatever percentage it is, it's less than 1%. That if that does happen, if they're targeting you, okay, you've got a desk, you've got file cabinets. You barricade that door. They're not getting in. I mean, they're not going to get in. There's no way.
Slow them down as much as you possibly can.
Slow them down. They have a clock in their head also. I mean, they know their end point is either they're going to be what they call suicide by cop or kill themselves, or I don't know why Cruz gave himself up. But that was an odd situation with Cruz in Parkland. He ended up at some Wawa or Walmart restaurant or something. They found him later. That was just an odd situation. Who knows what is in people's minds? I mean, I know we're going to talk about it a little bit, but no one knows right now what's in Crook's minds when he tried to shoot Trump. The rumors that are going around, and again, this is just my opinion, just listening to some former Secret Service personnel, the amount of ammunition they found and the bombs in his car, For my opinion, is that he wanted to be like a Las Vegas shooter. He wasn't going specifically for Trump. I think he just wanted numbers. It was an outdoor event. He had perfect positioning, and I think he just wanted a mass event. He just got lucky once he got up on the roof and said, "Hey, there's Trump. I think I'll take him out too." So I don't know. I don't think he specifically went there just to shoot the former president.
The FBI director, Christopher Wray, had mentioned that the shooter had a drone going over the area 2 hours prior, as recently as 2 hours prior, and was researching about the JFK assassination and things of that sort. So this actually leads to another question, but in a kind of a different dimension now, and kind of into the minds of these individuals. And the question is essentially, how do you or how do people essentially determine whether a threat is credible? And one of the reasons I ask is there is this absolutely idiotic trend on TikTok that was, I don't blame TikTok as much as I blame the idiots using it, but there was this bomb threat trend where you were supposed to call your school and make a bomb threat. And I mean, absolutely the lowest IQ behavior you can imagine, like just completely not having two brain cells to rub together. And these kids, I mean, there's my girlfriend's aunt in Los Angeles, who's a teacher as well, encountered this, and it's ludicrous, obviously, but that must create a greater burden as to which threats. How do you discern which threats are credible and which ones are not credible, are just silly, stupid, idiotic trends, or just someone trying to just get under someone's skin?
Yeah, or like, as you probably know, Samuel, back when I was in school, it was pulling the fire alarm to try to get out of a class or try to get out of taking a test. Same thing with calling in a bomb threat today. I think it's not only to get out of a test or whatever. I think it's just to see how people react because it's a thrill to whoever called it in or whatever. The other thing that you probably know that's happening is what's called swatting. Well, they will call into the police and say, "Hey, there's an active shooter going on at such and such XYZ elementary," to see their police response, to see them, rushing there with all these cars and everything and show up. And the school's like, "What are you doing here? What's going on?" "Oh, we got a phone call." So to try to get around that, what if a threat is credible? That's a very good question. The one thing about the Secret Service, they have a very good threat assessment team. I mean, it's a whole group of people that have done this. They've also done data on school shootings and what creates a threat towards that. But to tell you the truth, when you read that, there's no specifics, really. I mean, most of the time they'll say, yes, okay, it's usually males. Got it. Okay. It's usually white males. All right. Got it. But after that, it doesn't go by socioeconomic, if they're low income, if they're high income. It doesn't go by gender. It doesn't go by religion, upbringing. There's really no specifics on who's doing the shooting, except that majority of the time it's either a current student or a former student of that school, because Cruz was a former student. The guy up in Connecticut, the Sandy Hook, he was a former student. Nashville, that person was a former student. So they know the layout, they're watching all the time. And I try to tell, it's hard to tell schools because they just don't have the resources. I mean, if you've got a special resource officer, meaning an SRO, they're the ones that are supposed to be watching for this. But to know if it's credible, obviously, if you're looking outside the school, if you've got somebody that looks suspicious, yeah, something's going on. You got to raise your level up a little bit to know, hey, why is this person over here with binoculars looking at my school? But most of the time, they plan this stuff months in advance, sometimes years in advance. Now, it gets into an iffy, edgy area, because most schools now will have what's called a threat assessment team. I don't know if your school does. Usually what they'll do, they'll have a pamphlet on certain students, and they'll have a committee. They'll get together and say, student Mr. Smith or whatever the student's name made, threats towards another student, or made this threat, or made whatever is going on. Okay, what's the next step? What is the next step? Are we going to start searching their social media history? Are we going to grab their phone and start looking at it? Are we going to grab their computer? It gets into a civil rights area.
That's what I was about to say.
Right. How far do you go with this until you get into a certain point where it's, now you're invading someone's rights? So, yeah, the old cliche, see something, say something. I agree with that. You're not going to hear a lot of it on the media, but there's a lot of shootings out there that have been stopped by kids coming up and talking to an SRO, talking to a teacher saying, hey, Johnny over here has been acting really weird. I think something's going on. We need to talk to him. We need to find out what's going on. So it's still the old version of, you see something, say something, and you're not ratting anybody out. You're keeping yourself safe and your school safe. And again, this goes, beyond schools. If you've got somebody, look, years ago, Samuel, I'm sorry to laugh. It was the post office guys. It seemed to go off, the post office guys would start going off and start shooting up post offices because they were mad at the U.S. mail system or whatever. So it's just something that you have to be aware of. And you can't say, oh, that's just kids. That's just the way Johnny is. That's just the way, Susan is. Not in today's day and age. I don't think so. You and I know after the pandemic that we went through and all the defund the police stuff and all the psychological mental health problems with social media and the bullying, the cyberbullying, because when we were kids, Samuel, before the internet and all that stuff, you got bullied at school. Everybody got bullied. I mean, unless you were a bully yourself. And when you went home, you were done. Now it's 24 hours a day. You're bullied constantly online on your phone. I mean, it's just something where, as you know, the suicide rate is just gone crazy for kids because of the bullying, especially on the girls' end.
That alone is so many different factors.
Yeah.
I mean, we mentioned fight or flight. The thing is, fight or flight is a very good thing to have. It's important that we have this because fight or flight will give us the capacity to not necessarily outrun the bear. That's not going to happen, but
right.
At least being faster enough that we can evade, we can move behind things. If we are slashed, our likelihood for dying is lower, again, because of the hyperoxygenation and because of the coagulative functions that's occurring. So it increases our survival rates for whatever, through a manifold ways. That being said, if you stay in that fight or flight too long, like someone who's bullied
yes.
repeatedly, they're told that they're like a loser or whatever. They could be called any sort of derogatory word. They're living with that threat response consistently. And the thing is, I think everyone who's been through grade school knows about homeostasis, the immunological balance that we have in our body. But I don't think many people know about allostasis. And allostasis is when you are out of that homeostatic capacity, when you're in this kind of fight or flight for too long, your body starts breaking down. Yeah. And you're basically fried at that point, metaphorically. But it leads to long-term reproductive issues, digestive issues. It depends on at what age, like neurocognitive issues, and it could be unceasing. They could go to sleep with the last thought being whatever was just hurled at them, texted to them or DM'd to them, and they could wake up with 20 messages about how they're fat or they're stupid or like whatever, if it's homophobic or whatever it is. It's a completely new game. Whereas even I grew up with the internet, but it was always I think localized is the right word.
And as you know, once you get to that puberty, middle school, teenagers, you don't talk about it. You don't go to your parents. You don't say, hey, I'm having this issue, because you're just so embarrassed. And so you don't. When everyone was a teenager, you didn't want to talk to your parents about that. You needed some mentor, someone you could trust and go to and say, I'm having this issue. But as you know, I'm sure a lot of kids they don't do that.
And I've said it's one of the reasons why I teach. I think teenagers are the most complex organism we've ever discovered. And it's for, I think, a million different reasons. And, it is a funny sentence. I've said it maybe 1,000 times, but I mean it in almost every single capacity. Like neurologically or like neuroanatomically, our limbic system, the part for emotionality, is very, very active. Teenagers are very emotional,
Yes.
but also our prefrontal cortex, the component that's more for executive function and really, really deep, complex, thorough hypothetical thinking and social planning and reflection and maturity is not yet developed. So we don't have that as much.
Right.
On a more like neurosocial level, we turn less to our parents for support and turn to our cohorts,
Yes.
which makes sense evolutionarily, right? We don't want to imitate our parents if we're representing the new generation, because what they survived through might not model what we're surviving through. And this is, I think, exactly the point that we're making here.
Yes.
You know, with the internet, lack of internet, social media, and Facebook 2004, and now a million different things since 2011.
Yes.
It is wild. They're absolutely inundated. And so you've mentioned, you know, the being bullied, a history of violence. Males definitely have a higher rate of aggression across the board than females. And often it is, at least in the terms of domestic terrorist activities, it is often white males. So that wasn't the case in the Florida, the Pulse, the gay club shooting.
Yes. Day club, nightclub. Yes.
Yeah, and it wasn't the case at Virginia Tech as
No.
well. And these were big, massive tragedies.
Right.
So
and Las Vegas was middle-aged guy that was
Right.
and started taking those people out. So, but I think leaning back toward the schools, it is mostly younger white males that are doing that, and it's odd. You would think that most inner city schools with this issue of violence and gangs would have more school shootings rather than the outliers in suburbia or in a rural area. It's just an odd dynamic. I'm sure there'll be plenty of books about that, of why it's happening outside of the inner city schools with that, traditionally have more violence.
I would assume it's perhaps because they have already it's there already. They're not they're not the one exacting it. Maybe they're more acclimated to it. That there's violence everywhere. I mean, refugees, for example, fleeing wars don't have a higher tendency of school shootings or things of this sort. They might have PTSD, and that would perhaps yield occasional paroxysms of rage, which, if you knew their history, would be very understandable, not defensible, but understandable at least.
Right.
But yeah, so that would be fascinating. I mean, one thing that always kind of bothered me is when people would say, and this was more in the early 2000s, that it was the violent video games, or it's
cartoons. Violent cartoons.
Or cartoons or things like that. It's like I've watched my favorite show as a kid was Dragon Ball Z, and there was almost the point was violence. And one of the best ways to just snuff out that idea is you look at Japan, and Japan has a way higher tendency of adolescents playing violent video games, and their domestic terrorism, all of that is absolutely at the ground floor in comparison.
But I think that's a cultural thing over there. And some of these other Asian countries, but here. America's just a different dynamic.
But that's the thing. That's the thing that uncovers it. So, or that uncovers, that's the sort of the distinguishing factor here. So perhaps there's cultural factors. For example, communal nations that really have a communal aspect to them might have a lower tendency for someone to engage in this violence against their own people. And I don't mean their own people racially or in any way other than the people in their community. It could be in a city, a town, whatever. It could be heterogeneous in terms of race or religion. But the idea is that we are a community working together. Whereas the United States, even though occasionally we pretend to be very communal, we're a very independent. You've kind of like, and I'm not knocking capitalism, but sort of a hyper capitalistic society where it's you must survive, you must move forward, you must dominate. And that could lead perhaps to that sort of framework, I think, more easily tunnels into I'm going to commit violence on people who aren't part of, me. Whereas a community, your me's are everywhere.
That makes sense in one respect, but I do have to mention that European countries have school shootings. We just don't hear about it here. We don't. The media doesn't cover it. But there are plenty of examples of school shootings in Europe, South America. There was one in Brazil just less than 6 months ago. Two girls actually came in with backpacks and had pipe bombs in their backpacks, and they came in with knives and just started slashing students, and luckily got tackled and stopped from setting off the bombs. But it does happen, not so much in Asian countries, although you probably know in some of these Asian countries, especially China, it's all knives. For
Right.
some reason, it's not guns, it's knives. They will
And
just
the
go
UK
in and
as
start.
well. The UK
Yeah,
was very much,
yeah, it's mostly knives, and that's the other thing. I know we're here talking about the main subject of active shooters, but again, an active shooting event is like being struck by lightning. It is something very, very rare. I know the
you're in a
media.
thunderstorm. Be careful with
Yeah,
that
yeah. So it is
sentence.
it is very rare. What's happening more so in schools is more weapons are showing up. Guns, knives, whatever is showing up, either because it's gang violence or because of something else. But that's what's happening more so in schools than the active shooter part. So I try to say, look, yeah, be prepared for something happens in an active shooter, but more likely it's going to be a weapon that's going to show up in one of your classrooms than actually someone come in that wants to shoot up the school.
I think of one of the pioneers of social psychology. His name is Kurt Levin, and he has this very general equation to explain behavior, and it's that behavior equals a function of a person in their environment. And it is super zoomed out almost to the point of uselessness. But then you start tiptoeing inwards, and you look at what that environment entails. The immediate environment, meaning like their household, the charge of their upbringing and things of that sort. And you look at the person, of course, and the person is everything from how they see themselves, we'll call it their chemistry. This isn't the best word to use, but their neurochemistry. And even when you start doing that, it becomes so problematic because school shooters have been people who don't have a long history of violence.
Right.
And there are plenty of people who have long histories of violence who would not who have never even thought of this or say that they've never even thought of this, maybe had the potential to commit a school shooting or any sort of horrific instance of domestic terrorism, but it just hasn't. They just haven't done it.
No, I get it. Yes.
So it is a very extremely difficult thing. How do you go about that?
Yeah, I agree. How do you go about it? You do have threat assessment teams at the school, and not saying that I haven't heard anything of any of these threat assessment teams pointing out an individual and then that individual shooting up a school. I haven't heard any data on anything along those lines. But again, your best bet is, again, not to be hyper vigilant, but just to be aware of your surroundings. They call it situational awareness. And everybody's, you've heard that term. It's been around for years. But it's just something to just be aware of your surroundings. I mean, I'll give you one example of something that I had happen that it's just people fall into a routine. I went to a high school. I was told to go to a high school by my superintendent. He said they're having some issues there with open gates, people not being supposed to be on campus, all this kind of stuff. Go there and check it out. So I go, and I'm not like undercover. I'm just wearing a T-shirt. I have a baseball cap on. And all schools, you're supposed to have a lanyard with a pass that shows who you are. And I took that off. And high schools are very easy to get into. I mean, there's no issue there. So I'm on the campus. Samuel, I'm there for about 20 minutes. I'm walking around. Everybody's saying hi to me. How you doing? The kids, the teachers, everything. I'm some stranger. So near the end, I'm in the back and I see there's a room, an exercise room.
I'm sorry,
And
you said you were in the back?
back
Like
in the high
you made
school.
it.
Yeah, I'm
Okay, so
inside the
you
high school.
basically walked through the entire
Oh, yeah, I'm in
diameter
there
of
for
the high
20
school.
minutes walking around. Nobody's saying anything to me. Everybody's like, hey, how you doing? Hi. And I found out if you walk with purpose, you don't walk slowly like you're hiding and looking around. No, you walk with purpose. I got something to do. Here, I'm going to go across here. I'm going.
And you weren't dressed like an electrician or
No,
anything. You were just dressed like
no,
some dude.
I just dressed like some dude, got a baseball hat on, and I'm walking through with purpose. I'm here. I'm going. I have whatever direction I'm going in. This is where I'm going. I'm not kind of being suspicious. So I'm in the back of the high school, and there's an exercise room there, and the girls were doing some twirling things with these ribbons or something like that. So I'm watching that. So I'm like, all right, I'm getting out of here. This is something. There's something wrong. There's something wrong here. So it's near, I don't know, 11:30, something like that. They're getting ready for lunch. So I'm going across campus back to the parking lot, and all the students are filing out to go to lunch. And there's an assistant.
This is at least 30 minutes in.
Oh, at least 30 minutes in. Nobody said anything to me. So as I'm walking back to the parking lot, I mean, it's a big school. There's like, I don't know, 1,500 kids there.
Oh my God.
And I see an assistant principal who I had met once before at some meeting. I had met this person. And he's looking at me, and I glanced at him and I looked away and I keep walking. Well, he starts, beelining towards me. And he
Good.
says, "Can I help?" Yeah. He says, "Can I help?"
Finally.
I said, yeah, I'm looking for my car. And it completely threw him off. And he goes, "Your car?"
You're basically like in the play area, like the outdoor.
Yeah, I'm in the courtyard. I'm in the middle of this campus. And I said, "Yeah, I forgot I think I'm parked over there. I can't remember." And he was just totally like what? And I said, he goes, "Well, what are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I like to come to high schools. I like looking around at all the different high schools and stuff. I'm just spewing out anything I can think of, right?" And he's just looking at me with this quizzical look. And finally, what got to him, I said, "Yeah, I was in the back there and behind your school, and I saw this exercise room with all these girls in there, and they were doing this twirling things with the ribbons. So I thought I'd take some pictures of them." And as soon as I said that, he latches onto my arm and he goes, "You're coming with me." And I was like, "Okay."
How long?
We should have done that 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, like how
So,
long did that take?
oh
That's
my God, it took
crazy.
forever. So we get to the front of the office, and by that point, we get outside by the front office, and I pull out my pass, and I say who I am, and he still didn't believe me. And I'm throwing names out, the superintendent's name, the assistant superintendent's name, the school board member, all this stuff. And he's still like, "Who are you working with?" He was just so rattled. Finally, he settles down, and I told him what I was there for. I said, "I'm here to make an assessment because you've got some problems at school." I said, "I've been walking around here for 30 minutes and nobody said anything to me. I have no pass, nothing. I just walked onto your campus." So he goes, "Well, I'm not." What happens in a lot of the high schools, you'll have a principal with about 4 assistant principals. And one of the assistant principals will be in charge of doing the safety plan and any security assessments. And that wasn't him. He goes, "Well, it's so-and-so that's supposed to do that." He says, "But I can guarantee you," he says, we're a safe school. We know what we're doing here. Samuel, while we're standing...
That is such an absurd
Yeah.
thing to say,
Samuel.
having just been caught.
Yes, having just gone through this. It gets worse. While we're standing there, it's a metal gate. It's one of these swing gates that open up. While we're standing there, a kid comes up with his backpack on. He comes up to the gate, takes his backpack off, flips it over the gate so it hits the push button on the door, opens it up and walks in. And I look over at him and go, "Really? Really?" And
No way.
He just looks at me and he goes, "Yeah, I think we got to fix that." I'm like, "Oh my God." I said, you guys are in big trouble." So then he was panicking because he's like, "Oh no, you're going to go back to the superintendent." I said, "Yeah, I'm going to go back to the superintendent. I've been here for 30 minutes and I just watched a kid walk into a locked gate because he figured out to throw the backpack over and it opens up the door." So anyways, it was just something that, like you said, whatever the routine is, if you look like you belong, then you belong. I've been at elementary schools where I've walked in to an unlocked gate. It was supposed to have a lock on it. I sat there one day and watched it. And what happens is the maintenance personnel would put the lock on, but they wouldn't latch it. And the reason for that was when they got a delivery, he was only one person and he couldn't get there fast enough. So he must have told the delivery guy, hey, you'll see the lock on there, but just take it off and make your delivery and then put the lock back on, but don't latch it all the way. I watched this from a car. I said, you know what? I'm coming back here and going into the school. And I did. And I walked around again for another 30 minutes. And there's small children waving at me, the teachers, hey, I'm sitting on a picnic table outside. I'm nobody. I don't have a kid next to me. And I'm waving, hey, how you doing? Hi, kids. Hi. Finally, I get a hold of the principal. Finally. I mean, and yeah.
Before you get to the conclusion there,
Oh.
what goes through your mind as these adorable kids are like waving to you? And obviously, whenever anyone's looking at you and smiling and waving and it's sociable, you have a pleasant feeling. But in the back of your mind, I'm sure it's a roaring nightmare. What is specifically going through your mind?
Easily could have been kidnapped. Any of these kids could have been picked up. You put something over their mouth, you keep them quiet, and boom, you're gone. I mean, I was just like, you got to be kidding me. I said, what if I have some pedophile? I could have come in, hide in a bathroom, and I'm there taking pictures all day of these kids. And Samuel, I've got stories. I'm telling you, it boggles the mind.
Tell me about the principal. We didn't get to the principal yet. Sorry about that. That was my fault.
The other story was this principal denied it. Oh, no, everyone wears a pass here. I said, I just walked for 30 minutes in your school. I got nothing. And she was just like, again, in denial. Oh, no, that's not. I tell my teachers to confront people, to tell people, suspicious people, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, it didn't work.
This is so telling. And obviously, this is a part of the problem, the sort of the habituation, but also the denial. And not just the denial because they're more concerned with the reputation or with how they're going to be seen as opposed to the safety and security of the children.
Exactly. Instead of saying, wow, thank you. I'm glad you did this. There's a security thing. I got to talk to my staff. I will have a meeting immediately. I'm going to tell people this. Because as you know, Samuel, no one likes confrontation. No one confronts something just because they can. Look, you don't have to be confrontational. Go up to the person. I see you don't have a pass on. Can I help you? Are you here to see someone? Let me lead you to the office so we get you checked in. That's it. It's customer service. I mean, it's customer service 101. Just go in and talk to the person. Don't be afraid to talk to them. I mean, if there's somebody that's not supposed to be there, you got to do something. Someone has to step up.
If you're too afraid to talk to a stranger, you probably shouldn't be working at a school.
Exactly. Anyways, one other story that I want to tell you, and this goes back to not only routine of the school, but of parents. This was an elementary school that was in a very rich area. They moved to that area so they can have their kids in that school. Now, normally what happens at the beginning of the school year, the first 2 or 3 days, you've got preschool and kindergartners. It's their first time ever being at school. I understand. The parents are going to lead them all the way inside the school to the classroom and then drop them off. And every once in a while, you'll get 2, 3 kids that are just bawling their eyes out, don't want it. They don't have that. They don't want that separation anxiety. Okay, I get it. After 3 days, normally these kids look, hey, Dad, I got it. Because then it becomes an embarrassment thing. I got it. Because the rest of the kids, you want to be independent. So after 3 days, that was our cutoff. Well, at this school, there was no cutoff because it wasn't a policy at that time. So they were letting these parents bring these, young kids inside the school throughout the whole year. I was like, how do you know who's coming into the school?
Was there like a sign-in or?
No, nothing. At the beginning of school, at the arrival, they park their cars, they bring their kids in, and here we go. They're inside. I'm like, how do you know who this person is? It could be the next door neighbor who decided to bring the kid in that day because the parents at work, or it could be Uncle John, or it could be Grandpa. I don't know who these people are. I don't trust anybody. So they're bringing these people in. Anyways, I talked to the principal. I said, you can't keep doing this. You don't know who's inside your school. Nobody's signing in. There's nothing. They could drop that kid off and then have full access to the inside of the school. Okay, let's have a meeting. So we had a meeting at night where the parents came in. And I'm telling you, Samuel, I was getting emails They were cursing at me.
Parents.
Were taking about this issue, just the issue of bringing their kids all the way in. They did not want to drop them off at the entrance. They wanted to take their child all the way to the classroom and then drop them
That's
off.
not good for the child either.
No, of course not. Oh my God, the kids! You talk about separation anxiety. Jesus, kids are going to get attached to you for the rest of his life.
Right. And they're never going to have resilience.
No, they're never going to let go. They're never have independence. And I told these parents, I said, look, I finally got so mad. There were two parents sitting in front of me at this meeting. I don't know, there's probably 100 of them there. They're all screaming at me. So I said, look, do you know this person sitting next to you? And they said, well, no, just to see them in passing in the school. I said, well, would you trust that person sitting next to you to go to your child's classroom and possibly talk to them or say to them, you're bullying my son or my daughter? And they're like, well, no, I wouldn't want that. I said, well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You have strangers coming into the school that possibly could harm your children. I said, you have no idea who these people are. I said, you don't know this person outside of school. You don't know what they're capable of. I don't trust anyone. And finally, that their mind started to change. They're thinking, yeah, that kind of makes sense. So I was at that point, I was able to get at least 3/4 of the audience to agree with me. There were parents that pulled their kids out. It did happen.
Wait, they pulled their kids out because they didn't like the change?
They didn't like the change
Oh my
of having
God.
that
I would
couldn't
love
bring their
to
child
meet
all the way
those
to the
children today. Like whatever age they are now, maybe they're older than me, just to know how they've developed with that idea that if there's anything even remotely alarming, parents are immediately there. And because that can't be a good equation at all.
I can remember when I was a child, I was a mama's boy. I clung to my mother. You know, we would go to a department store. You know, if I lost sight of my mom, I would be panicking. And Samuel, just is kind of off topic. On the other side of it, when we had our son, who's adopted, I don't think if he was blood, it probably wouldn't have mattered. We did an experiment. I said, because he was so independent, I said, let's go to the store and just let go of him and let him wander around and see if he even looks for us. No. 10, 15 minutes. Nothing. Wouldn't even look to see if we were there. We were at the beach.
And how old is he at this point?
He was probably 4 or 5 years old. Samuel, we were at the beach down here in Florida.
Wow.
And he started walking away. And we looked at each other saying, let's see how long it takes for him to turn around to see if we're there. He just kept going. He never turned around. All of a sudden he's a dot. I said, I guess we better go get him. And it was just so funny because when it was the opposite.
He starts swimming into the water.
Oh
You're like, he's not going to stop.
No, he's not going to stop. Oh my God, it was so funny. But he's thankfully he's turned out to be a normal, decent adult. So that's.
I mean, I did the same thing. I mean, again, I'm adopted as well, and at about 4 years old, when I was staying with my I guess my temporary guardians, who I love immensely to this day, and I talk to them very frequently. I call them grandma and grandpa now, just to, Good. Indicate how close I am with them.
Sure.
But I was also lost in a department store. But and I was completely fine with it too. I was just exploring the place.
Okay.
And the one factor that's extremely important is I didn't speak English, and we were in New Jersey.
My gosh.
And they were like, "How would you ever get back to us?" And I was like, "Well, I would tell someone who speaks Armenian." And they were like, "No one speaks Armenian here." I was like, "Why not?" It was so well-meaning, but they were so mad at me.
That's a good story. I like that.
What else makes someone good at this job? What other traits or qualities do you have to be neurotic, for example?
Yeah, in some respects, yeah. But again, speaking from a law enforcement personnel, your job is to tell people what to do. And it's that simple. Go here, stop there, turn around there. You're pointing and telling people what to do. So yeah, is there a power complex behind that? Absolutely. When you see someone in uniform, I mean, your dynamics change. I went from being in uniform and seeing how people react, and then I was fortunate enough to work in the West Wing where I was in a suit and tie. Totally different dynamic, completely different, because Washington, D.C., the center of, all this, the power and stuff, you walked around with a suit on. Everybody looked at you completely different than when you're in uniform. It's just something that that uniform created this power complex, that you could tell people what to do.
And that's part of situational awareness too. It's just
Yeah.
at that point you are emanating the factor.
Yes. So you did feel this kind of, this kind of power. I'm the man. So yeah, there is a little bit neurosis behind that. But also, the neat thing is that when we were at the Secret Service, it wasn't specifically a law enforcement, cop job. We weren't out there arresting people constantly. We didn't have to deal with domestic issues, with families and stuff. So we didn't have that issue. It was the most important part of our job was protection. Just protection of the complex. You went in layers. First it was personnel, then it dropped down to staff, then it dropped down to, the buildings and stuff. So that's how it went, and that's what your job was. And you were assigned to whatever you were doing, and some of it was dangerous, some of it was a lot less dangerous. So the nice thing about working there was that every day was different. Every day, because there were some days there'd be some threats coming out, or there were some days where the president was going to have a conference where all these people were coming in. So every day was different, and there were obviously, like any other job, there were good days and bad days. There were days where you got to see Hollywood stars and diplomats and movie stars and sports stars. There were other days where you'd have a protest that was driving you crazy because you were assigned to that part of the building where you had to deal with these protesters.
And now you become the problem to the protesters, at least, because you're like a manifestation of whatever they're protesting.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they looked at you. I mean, that's, I think, partly where the defund the police thing came.
Right.
That, you're the problem. I'm not the problem. You're the problem.
It sounds like some of the other factors you've mentioned. So obviously situational awareness, but like a very complex one. You know that when you're wearing this outfit, people are going to look at you in a certain way, and that your words mean something different now. It's the same way that in some psychological experiments, they tell you, be careful when you present yourself as the researcher, the lead researcher at whatever university, because every word you say, they're going to put a lot of weight to it, and that might sway their sort of natural response. So that's something that we like for anyone who's teaching or any position of authority to be aware that there are these dynamics that occur that are extremely influential and invisible, unfortunately.
Yes,
and
I agree.
So there's that. There's the component of being able to take a series of not just protocols, and it's not just teamwork, but really being able to coordinate, but not just, and coordinate is just, being able to harmonize with people while your environment might be disharmonious, while there might be so many other variables shifting in, you say there's every day could be entirely different, whether it's at a protest or a shooting or a concert for someone who, let's say they're being canceled and there's people who are making threats outside. These are entirely disparate environments, but the coordination, the communication, these are things that must be standardized.
No, I agree. And that's the nice thing about our training, how we were trained. And again, like I talked about, where we had to shoot once a month, highly specialized. I mean, I know what's happened over in Pennsylvania is kind of threw some mud at the agency. But for me, my opinion, it's the Secret Service is one of the top agencies in the world, government agencies. It's just they have the best people and the best training we ever got. So with that being said, I want to go back to, not to change the subject, but I want to go back to where you talked about that person that said,
just to reiterate, you're talking about the mother at the movie theater with her daughter, with the person. Yeah.
Yes. Had that gut feeling that she thought there was something wrong with this person. Everyone has that ability. And there are books out about that, about enhancing that ability. Everyone has that ability. If you have that gut feeling, expand on it.
There's a great book on this called Blink. I'm not a huge fan of Malcolm Gladwell, but that book has very good instances where that sort of initial the initial gut feeling. There's so many things that the
Yes.
subconscious picks up, and there's been a bunch of studies on this too. And there's also a great book on the subconscious called Subliminal by Leonid Mladenov. But there's so many things subconsciously that we pick up, and then we logically, what's the word we were using? Deny. We logically
Yes.
deny it because of the discomfort
Correct.
it might cause.
Yeah, this can't be happening. Everything's fine. I'm okay. Let me go do something else. But I would want, especially when we have something like threats like that, or a suspicious person at a school ground or in your building or whatever, to enhance that going, okay, that something about them doesn't seem right, but I got other things to do. Somebody else will take care of it. No, I would enhance on that and either tell someone else, hey, I saw this person out here. I think there's something off. Can we go talk to them or whatever? But yeah, just don't let it go. Not in today's world. I think it's the same thing as if you've got a child. I say a child. I mean, anybody under 17 in school that has issues that you think someone else will handle. I've seen Johnny today. Something seems a little bit off, but he's a good kid. I'll let it go.
That's
You
just
do have to.
denial with more steps, is it not?
Right. No, exactly. You got to step up. You got to say something, especially again with today with these kids with the social media. And I know you're probably yourself with your school struggling with this cell phone usage, and that's something again that's coming out to the forefront. And I don't want to switch to that, but there is a safety issue from my end with cell phones because what happens in an emergency, you'll get kids that are constantly texting on the phone, which basically interrupts them from listening to safety announcements, their teacher, the police, or whatever. Well, they're busy texting on the phone of what's going on, or possibly sending out false texts about something that is none of their concern. But I've had it happen. I've had it happen during bomb threats. I've had it happen during a supposed gun detection, at high school where these false texts were coming out.
And also, I mean, they could do things that exacerbate the situation even worse.
Yes.
Texting and
Yep.
I mean, again, I hope I never experienced this, but if something like that were happening to me, I think my first impulse would be to reach out to my loved ones and let them know. And then,
Yes.
I mean, that would be my impulse. I don't know if I would actually do it because I wouldn't want I wouldn't want to spend my last moments worrying about them worrying. I would rather
Right.
send like an "I
Exactly.
love you" message out of the blue to the people I care about.
Right. Yeah.
But
No,
it
but
would be impulsive. It would be very, I think, just hardwired almost. So this routine
yeah.
building is so critical that we keep going back to. And I'm glad that you've mentioned this, that it is something that has to be not just understood consciously and academically and professionally and through the teams that run these institutions, whether it's at an office building or at a school or a concert hall, but it has to be something that becomes the default. If something even goes a little bit wrong, with the least amount of brain activity what the movements are.
Yes. No, I agree.
You have this like extremely dynamic, and every day is a totally different thing, to here's something where schools are obviously varying. I've worked at several different schools and they are very much different, but at least that there's some sort of structure that's loosely defined in some cases. So it is interesting that these protocols can work, the harmony, the making sure that there's a habituation, capacity in the people that you're working with. So it's interesting that these protocols, we'll call them, are
Yes.
uniform throughout these very different vocations.
No, I agree. And the word you'll probably hear more from safety experts is a holistic approach, which basically is just the community and everything coming together. So we make everybody safe. It's a little bit of, the kumbaya moment, but actually it works. You do have to get parents involved. The one thing that I've been on some of these podcasts with parents, and I've asked them, I said, you talked to your children about any emergency procedures at school?
I thought that was going to
Most
be
of
the whole question. Do you talk to your children?
Oh,
I was like, oh my God.
do you talk to your children? No, no. I said, do you ask them about what emergency procedures are going on at school. And most of the time, no, we drop them off and we let the school handle it. Not in today's day and age. You have to find out what's going on, because there are some things, like I talk about, these marketing companies that are marketing things that are unsound, that are dangerous actually for children to be in schools. And parents have to talk to their children, have to be involved with what's going on with the schools, with their safety and security, because your children are going there. It's not like years ago where you just dropped them off and, okay, see, I got to go to work. See you later. How was it at school today? How are your grades? You do have to know how they're doing. Everybody knows about fire drills. We've been doing fire drills for hundreds of years, and you can do it blindfolded. Fire drill, boom, you go out, you come back in. It's different when you start talking now with the world, with active shooters or weapons on campus. So parents have to be more involved.
Or bomb threats or anything, yeah.
Or bomb threat. But you have to watch out, because I've had bomb threats where it's just a threat. Yet with schools, they'll evacuate. I argued with them. I said, is there a device? Has anybody found anything? No, but we're going to evacuate because one child dies. It'll be all over the media. I'm like, oh my God. So they'll evacuate a big school and go, 1,000, 1,500 feet away like they're supposed to. The fire department and police will show up. Well, as that's happening, the kids are sending texts. Hey, there's a bomb threat at our school, Mom. We're outside, blah, blah, blah. And what's going to happen? Here they come. Here come the parents. Here they come. It is absolute chaos. And there's no reunification. There's nowhere for them to go. I had to get a ladder truck, and this was just extreme. I had to get a fire ladder truck to block an intersection to stop these parents from coming in. I said, look, the kids are perfectly safe. There is no bomb. It's just a threat. I can't have you just coming in just to pick up your student, because, what's it, at noontime, or you take them home?
And also, what if like the very obvious thing is, as a teacher, if someone took one of my students, my teenagers, and they took them away and I didn't know where they were, I would be absolutely mortified. I would have to find out immediately. I'd have to call the parents, and sometimes parents don't pick up immediately. And if they're driving, or in New York City, if they're in the subways or something like that, I might not even be able to get through to the parent, even if they want to speak to me, which some teachers, I haven't had this situation, not for a long time, but I don't have parents who don't want to speak to me, because I get in a good relationship with the parents very quickly. But the idea that that's only one student. What if 12 of your 32 students are now missing? Mm-hmm. What happens to the teacher who's in their second year, untenured, maybe a little bit just a little bit green, we'll say? What's going to happen to them? They're gonna go crazy.
No, Samuel, I've had it happen. I've had kids just walk off. I'm going to walk home, and it's gone. Like, what? Because minimum 2 hours. For a school that big with 1,500 kids, 2 hours to clear that building. So they're sitting outside in the heat or wherever. You got to take care of that. Get them water. Maybe you can find an air-conditioned building, but most of the time they're just outside somewhere.
Or in the pouring rain.
Right, yeah. Exactly. It's raining outside. And the kids are like, I'm just going to go home. And they'll go. Especially in high school. It's, oh, my God.
Yeah. I want to ask you about this book you've written. First of all, thank you so much. There's been so much information here, and I can't wait to personally revisit this and sort of think about how I'm going to incorporate it.
I tell you, this is the most interesting podcast I've ever been on. Because
you say that to all the podcasters.
No, because it's either professional podcasters who do this and just bring on a guest for whatever, or it's a podcaster who's a mother or a parent or someone interested in the safety and security, something like, and that industry. But no, seriously, this is the most interesting I've ever been on with your background. And I'd see all the. I was going to ask you, have you read all those books behind you? Because it looks like there's hundreds of books behind you stacked up there.
I think.
Have you read them all?
Well, I mean, there's some textbooks where I haven't read every single page of the textbook, but I've read every book behind me, at least like 80% of the books, at the very least 80%.
Wow. All right. So now you got to read my book.
Yeah. So tell me about that was a masterful transition.
Anyway, Samuel. It's only 77 pages long. It's a guidebook. I wanted to write a book. Well, I wrote it after Uvalde. I was so mad what happened with Uvalde and that police response. My wife, my current wife at the time, she's like, "Oh my gosh," she says, "You're so angry." She says, "You got to put it down on paper." So I just wrote
I have
it
so
out.
many. I have so many of these now in my mind floating around. Can you remind me which one? Uvalde was very recently,
Yes,
right?
Uvalde was in Texas, and this was the one where you had 40, or maybe more than that, 40 police officers arrive, and nobody did anything. They stood out in the hallway waiting for direction, and the chief of police, who was the lead officer, didn't do anything. They were the ones who froze. At first, they tried to go through the door, and the shooter kept shooting at them through the door, so they backed away, and they waited. Meanwhile, while they're waiting, the kids are texting them going, "Save us, come and help us, please. We're dying in here." And you did have kids in there that were bleeding out. No, but they wouldn't go. They thought it was a hostage situation, so they wouldn't go. But they didn't know. They had no idea. Anyways, I was so angry with that response. I wrote this book.
And that was May 2022, right?
Yeah, the shooting, yes, was in, I believe it was May. Anyway, so I wrote the book, and it's called The First 5 Minutes. And the reason for that is FBI's data was active shooter events last normally between 3 to 5 minutes, which doesn't seem like a lot of time. But when you're sitting in a classroom and it's happening, it seems like a lot of time. Usually 3 to 5 minutes. So I named it The First 5 Minutes. And in there, it's just, again, it's a guidebook. And I just lead you through everything from active shooter response to getting implicit memory of the lockdown procedures and talking about some of these other marketing companies that are out there. And it's just something basically I wrote for teachers and students and parents to just flip through it and have easy access to something that you could relate to. I didn't want to make a 200 or 300 page book filled with edge-of-speak and something that's going to collect dust on a shelf. I didn't want to do that. I wanted something simple to read, concise, and you just get the information right away, quickly, because I want to keep everything simple. Anyway, it's on Amazon, and if you type in The First 5 Minutes, it'll come up in like the first 5 or 6.
I actually have it opened already.
Oh, see, all right,
Yeah.
There you go. So again,
And I'm buying it directly after this.
Thank you. Anyway, it's just something that it's just easy to read. It's not an educational, diatribe with fancy language or anything.
But it is an informative, basically
me, I
how
think-
to best prepare.
Yes, I think it is. Again, I'm a plain speaker, practical. Sometimes I'm kind of blunt, but just to get the message across that this is what you should do. And there's plenty of books out there like that. It was just something I wanted to do. I had never done it before, never written a book before. So I gave it a shot. And I'm thank you, but I'm hopeful that you get some good information out of it. And if you can pass it on, if you know a teacher, if you know someone who's in that profession, I know you're a teacher, but other teachers, just some great information that I think it's usable.
Given your experience, your diverse experience, and the length of your experience, and some of the anecdotes that you've given, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I work with 340 teachers, so.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, thank you. That's more sales for me. Anyway, sorry.
It's more security for our
Exactly.
school. That's another way to
One thing I did
another way
want
to
to
phrase
mention.
that.
One thing I did want to mention in the book, you can download. It's a credit card size quick reference card, and I had them laminated. You can do that, but basically, it's just giving you. And as we know, Samuel, no one knows how they're going to react in an emergency. So if you do go through a lockdown procedure or a suspicious person or a bomb threat, you quickly can go, oh, I forgot this step. And I've used it in some of the schools. They like it because they can attach it to their lanyard, to their pass.
You could just put it in your wallet. Like
You can
that's
put it in your wallet,
excellent.
You can quickly look at it. Oh, geez, I forgot. Because again, there's something you're going to forget. Everybody does. You're going to.
That's genius. That is genius because again, you are an autopilot, and now you have something that because you might not have an authority to tell you, this is not right. Oh,
No.
excellent.
Exactly. And I found out because I would start talking to people like this, and they kind of looked at me kind of quizzical. Like, I don't know if I'd ever use that. There was a doctor friend of mine, when I showed these to her, she goes, oh, yeah. She says, we use those all the time. I'm like, What are you talking about? She says, sometimes I'll come up with a code purple. I haven't used that in months. I don't know what that is. So we look at our quick reference card. Okay, purple means this. I said, okay, that gives me, some kind of satisfaction that maybe this would work, that you can quickly reference that. Anyway, that's in the book along with the safety plan and some other stuff. But yeah, I tell you what, read it. It's probably take you, somebody like you, an hour and a half to read. Boom, it's easy reading. You'll get through it. And let me know. Let me know what you think. And, I'd appreciate some feedback.
On my next podcast, it's going to be right there. I'll tell you exactly where it's going to be.
That'd be great.
Yeah, of course. By the way, people have thought that this is fake, that this was like
some AI generated thing. No, it looked, no, it's real. Yes, that's real.
You never know, because some people are very good at that kind of generation.
Oh yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Some people might think that now all of it is fake except for that book, and I've got to topple the whole damn thing. Daniel, I got to say it one more time, that the laminated card inside is so genius. I mean, how many times have we mentioned the absolute fact that's been tested over and over again in way too many unfortunate events, that we kind of default to a routine that sometimes might be the exact wrong thing. The perpetrator of whatever miscellaneous violence might want us to go through that routine. That routine is exactly what that person wants, or people, I guess, want. Having something there to be a little bit more granular, confident, non-sort of habitual, I think is such an absolute genius move. That is taking theory and making it directly applicable. Daniel, I love that.
Thank you, Samuel. I appreciate that. That gives me a lot of hope.
It affected me more for the psychological aspect, but I haven't met someone who's uninterested in psychology unless they don't know. Well, okay. I know people who don't like psychology because of certain reasons, the way it's been misapplied in Nazi Germany, or people could not like it for certain religions. I'm not going to say which. Would look at certain aspects, and certain cults also. Same thing with psychology, because what disrupts a cult more than psychology?
Sure.
But the thing is, I don't think anyone on Earth really is uninterested in human behavior. I just don't think we really have that capacity. Even people who have debilitating social, if we have like debilitating social factors where we're just not good at social processing or anything like that, we are very interested in the mechanics of behavior, the movements of people, what words mean, hierarchies, who we listen to, who we don't. No matter what, these things I think are incredibly interesting. And I'm not giving this long-winded tirade for no reason, but rather because I think if you really double down on the reality of the dangers of habituation in situations that demand non-habituation, or rather that demand that you go into a new habit, one that hasn't yet been crafted for in many of these schools, evidently, because you can go through them undetected, or at the very least unstopped. I think that is something that will probably sway some people, because you'll speak to them on the language of behavior, of the behavior that we all commit, we're all guilty, or whatever word we want to use, where we all are interested in behavior, and we all have habits, and we all default to habits occasionally when things go a little bit awry.
You're absolutely right. I should mention how do they handle a suspicious person on campus?
The more you make it clear that this is something that we all do, it's okay that we do this. This is part of our processing. If we didn't have this, every day would be such the most chaotic new information, and there would be, they estimate that like 42% of our day is pure habit. Completely pure habit.
Well, I agree. Yes.
So it would be a good idea to understand which ones could perhaps use an alternative habit to create in situations that demand them.
Yes. No, I agree. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning
Daniel,
that.
thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Oh, it's
I
been a
know this
pleasure.
is supposed to be an hour, but obviously went beyond.
Oh, I trust you to edit it and pick up on the things that you think are important, to think your audience would, pick up on. And I look forward to, the finished product.
I'm going to condense it into 8 seconds at 800 speed for the TikTok generation. I think they'll get the gist.
Well, let me say one thing to finish up. I always tell the audience in any podcast I'm at, whenever any situation comes up for you, I don't care what it is, keep yourself safe, and then you can always help others. Always keep yourself safe first, then you can help others. I try to give the story of when you're on an airplane and that oxygen mask comes down. What do they tell you? You put your mask on first, then you can help the elderly or help a child. So the same thing goes in any kind of emergency situation. You keep yourself safe first, then you can help other people.
Daniel, again, thank you so much. And let's say that someone wants to get more information, and they've already read your book, but they want to kind of pick your brain, or they want to interview you also, or I don't know, maybe it's a concerned parent who is trying to do some of the things you're doing at their school, and they're being met with just rampant denial as
Yes.
you've experienced. How can people reach out to you directly?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. You can. I know I've got that difficult last name, but I'm sure you'll have it on there. They can look me up on LinkedIn. I've also got a First 5 Minutes page on Facebook. I believe my email address is in the book. It's Canine Korak. That was my dog's name, at protonmail.com. You can easily email me, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you, Daniel, and I will be very excited to get your book in 2 to 3 business days.
Thank you, Samuel. It was a pleasure. It was nice meeting you again. It was nice being on, and if something happens in the near future, bring me on again. It'll be fine. It'll be great. It was a great conversation. Thank you.